Title: The Midnight Game. Late one Friday night, I stumbled upon an old Reddit thread discussing a mysterious game called The Midnight Game. The instructions were simple: write your name on a piece of paper, turn off all the lights, and at the stroke of midnight, knock on your front door 22 times. The 22nd knock would supposedly invite the Midnight Man into your home. Intrigued and skeptical, I decided to give it a try. The air turned dense as the clock struck 12. My heart raced as I knocked 22 times, half expecting nothing to happen. But, to my surprise, a cold breeze swept through the room, and the atmosphere shifted. The rules stated I had to relight my candle within 10 seconds of the Midnight Man's arrival. I fumbled with the matches, struggling to strike one in the darkness. As the flame flickered to life, a tall, shadowy figure emerged from the blackness. The Midnight Man. His presence was chilling, and a hushed silence enveloped the room. The candlelight danced eerily, casting distorted shadows on the walls. The instructions warned that if the candle went out, the Midnight Man would unleash his horrors. I navigated the darkened house, paranoia gnawing at my sanity. Whispers echoed through the halls, and the temperature dropped. Unseen hands brushed against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. The minutes crawled by like hours. Every creak, every rustle, became a potential threat. I could feel the Midnight Man's malevolence lingering in the shadows, taunting me. Just as I thought I might survive the ordeal, the candle flickered, threatening to extinguish. Panic set in as I desperately shielded the flame from an unseen force attempting to snuff it out. In a final burst of courage, I managed to relight the candle, banishing the Midnight Man back into the abyss. The house returned to normal, but the lingering fear remained. I shared my harrowing experience on Reddit, warning others of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Skeptic or not, some things are better left untested. The Midnight Game had proven that the line between the ordinary and the supernatural is thinner than we dare to believe. The Stalker in the Shadows. Late one night, I stumbled upon a Reddit thread filled with chilling stories of encounters with stalkers. One story, in particular, sent shivers down my spine. The Redditor shared their experience of being followed by an unknown individual for weeks. It started with strange phone calls in the middle of the night, heavy breathing on the other end of the line. They dismissed it as a prank, but things quickly escalated. The stalker began leaving disturbing messages on their doorstep, written in blood-red ink. They would find cryptic notes slipped under their windshield wipers, detailing intimate details of their daily routines. The sense of constant surveillance grew unbearable. The Redditor installed security cameras around their home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious stalker. And one night, their worst fears were confirmed. The footage revealed a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, watching their every move. Terrified, they reported the incidents to the police, but without concrete evidence, little could be done. The stalking continued, escalating into terrifying encounters on the street. The Redditor lived in a constant state of fear, never knowing when the stalker would strike next. Desperate for answers, they turned to the Reddit community for advice and support. Many offered words of encouragement and shared their own chilling encounters with stalkers. Together, they formed a virtual support network, helping each other cope with the psychological torment. Finally, after months of torment, the Redditor managed to capture a clear image of the stalker on their security footage. Armed with this evidence, they went to the police once more. This time, action was taken, and the stalker was apprehended. The Redditor shared their story as a cautionary tale, urging others to be vigilant and stay safe. The chilling reality of being stalked is a horrifying reminder that danger can lurk in the shadows, just out of sight. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired, out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty, I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22, and then fell asleep. Some time later I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rear view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer, you know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Fuck that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car, parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rear view mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey! Hey you! Get the fuck out of your car! Now!" I hoped the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story: don't fucking sleep on the side of a deserted road. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia, they went on to recall. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I saw something strange, a wooden board, which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space, lay fractured in 2 pieces on the ground. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord, asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance, since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." I called, and she explained that her last 2 tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in two. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped. But I heard something else, whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over, "It's your turn. It's your turn." I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try to unwind. Then a fuse blew. My pet budgie, Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him and dried him. I was so confused. At 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Oh, wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. "I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live elsewhere now, the landlord recently called. She said that her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on there." In the spring of 2003, fresh out of high school, I found myself with a summer job opportunity that took an eerie turn. A friend of my dad's, Duke, offered me a position as a night watchman in a local cemetery. The catch was that several cemeteries in the area had been vandalized recently, and Duke needed someone to guard the grounds between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. He assured me it wasn't an official county position but was willing to pay me out of his pocket. The cemetery sat on the outskirts of the town, surrounded by farmland and a small wooded area. Duke's briefing included a tour of the sprawling grounds, emphasizing the need for vigilance. As the sun set on my first shift, Duke handed me a key to a locker, revealing a shotgun inside. He explained it was for extreme emergencies, a precaution against potential troublemakers like bored kids or even grave robbers. As the night settled in, my initial hesitation turned into a chill down my spine. The cemetery, with gravestones dating back to the 1800s, took on a haunting atmosphere. During my first sweep, an indescribable scraping sound caught my attention. Brushing it off as an animal, I continued my rounds, concluding at the back of the cemetery near a small wooded area. Returning to the maintenance shed, my refuge for the night, I decided to immerse myself in a Stephen King novel to distract from the uneasy feeling. However, the tranquility shattered when footsteps echoed outside the shed. Slow and deliberate, the footsteps circled, and a sense of being watched enveloped me. Summoning courage, I stepped out into the darkness, only to be greeted by an unnatural silence. Crickets had fallen silent, and an unspoken presence lingered. A faint scraping sound persisted, leading me to a fresh grave in the newer section. The noise emanated from below the ground, sending shivers down my spine. Suddenly, the ground collapsed, revealing a tunnel beneath. Panic set in as a casket moved within, propelled by thin, gray arms with long, claw-like fingers. Terrified, I fled to the shed, but upon my return, chaos awaited. The shed was ransacked, my phone destroyed, and the atmosphere became suffocatingly silent. Shuffling footsteps surrounded the shed, and in a desperate move, I retrieved the shotgun from the locker. A deafening blast filled the air, and the assault ceased. The next day, I reported a fabricated story to the police, concealing the unearthly horrors I had witnessed.